Welcome to Benevolent Business, the podcast exploring how to build a business that positively impacts the environment, employees, the community, and much more, discussing with business leaders and founders their unique experiences and what we can all learn from their journeys. Brought to you by your host, Hayden Bloomfield, and producer, David Proud.
This is my tired voice.
This week, we're joined by Dr. Phyllis, SantaMaria and Gabriel Flores from Learning Without Borders. So we've got twice as many guests this week, so twice the pressure for Dave and me. So without further ado, let's get started. Welcome, Phyllis, and welcome, Gabriel, to Benevolent Business.
Thank you. Thank you, Hayden.
How are you both?
Feeling great. Quite excited about this podcast.
Good.
Very happy to be here with you. Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you for giving me your time. So to get stuck straight in, get a quick 30-second summary from you both. Phyllis, can you make a start with giving us a quick snippet into what Learning Without Borders exactly is?
Well, we're a training, coaching, and consulting organization that helps people and organizations make a social impact with their work, because most people want to have meaning in their work, and so we help them develop that.
Perfect. And then, Gabriel, can you tell us about the social impact game?
Sure. So the social impact game is, we're probably first to tell you what we mean by social impact. Yep. So social impact is improving the lot of people around you in some measurable way. So that's what we say social impact is. And then what the social impact game is, it's an employability and leadership program for delivering real world projects that make a measurable social impact. We're currently delivering that program at the University of Nottingham as an accredited module. And it includes different parties like business partners, which are organizations that want to tackle a social problem through a project advisors, which are experienced professionals that mentor the students, and of course the students who want to get employability skills through a practical project that makes a social impact.
Brilliant. So you're both of you involved in Learning Without Borders and with the social impact game. So are they seen as, do you run them as separate entities, or is it something that you bring them sort of both together?
So the social impact game is a product of Learning Without Borders. So it's one of our offerings.
Right.
Okay, perfect.
And we also offer our programs to professionals individually and in small businesses.
To get a bit of background, so I'll start with yourself, Phyllis. So wanted to just get an understanding of how your background led into Learning Without Borders, because as well, and can you go into a bit of detail of your PhD in education there as well?
Oh, okay. Well, we have to be careful because I don't want to talk too long. But so basically, my background is in, I guess the place where I started with really making a social impact was when I was in the United States Peace Corps in Guatemala. And I founded the first women's weaving group in the country many decades ago. And we developed products that the women could sell and they could run their own businesses. And that made a huge social impact in their lives and the lives of their families. And so that, for me, has been the thing that I've been looking ever since to replicate that wherever I go, making a difference with my work. So that, as I said, as many decades ago. I guess to make it go short, I've also worked in education in Germany as well as in the UK and in Kenya. I was also a Peace Corps volunteer in Kenya, teaching in a boys' school way out in the bush. Wow. And also that was really exciting about making a difference there. And in Germany, because I'll tell you about what led to my PhD. In Germany, I taught first in a grammar school and then in an engineering college. And what I really tapped into in the engineering college, because these were people from the ages of 16 up to 30 years old, is to how to motivate them to really learn English, but tapping into what they knew from engineering and also what they really loved. At the time, it was pop music. These are people who had 10 years of English and never really learned any English. But I really got them learning English, got them excited about it. And for me, again, that was a really fulfilling thing. And that led to my doing my PhD in education. When I got back to the UK after working in Germany for 3 years, I did first a master's in linguistics, and then I did my PhD, and I researched about the language and learning skills of engineering students. And I followed engineering students around, studying them, And they said to me, the reason we're letting you do this is because we don't want the same thing to happen to other students as what we're having to endure. I feel that my work really is, I want to fulfill on that promise to those students with helping students and also professionals who are in work, seeing how they can really make a difference with their work, because so many people feel disengaged in their work. I then also had a wonderful opportunity to work at the BBC on a massive project. Now, this was in the 1980s, before the internet. And we were a pioneering interactive multimedia project called the Doomsday Project. And this involved 1 million people, school people and people in the community collecting information about their area. And we put this onto into the Doomsday Project disc. Some of Her Majesty's inspectors said at the time, this was instant communication, instant curriculum development, because we got people out in the community collecting information about the community, saying about what it was like to live in the community, and also using technical skills. Okay, then we didn't have the same digital tools that we have now. But it was so exciting to see people really getting out there, learning, and really making a difference in their community. And this is again what motivates me about working as we do with Learning Without Borders and the social impact game, that there's a hunger for people to be able to make a difference with their work. So that led me to working into interactive multimedia, and I designed training programs for engineers. This was an Anglo-German project. Again, I tapped into what the engineers knew and the challenges that they face, and designed it so that when they looked at it, they said, yes, it's really like that. These are the communications problems we have. And people then learned the communication strategies. Then I moved on to working with Microfinance, because I found that was a way that I could combine my international experience with developing skills. And this is working with microfinance organizations. Microfinance is a way of making financial services available to poor people. So we have up to 2 million people in the UK who don't have access to financial services. And in the rest of the world, it can be up to, I would say, at least a billion people. Because financial services are so essential, because, if you have a safe place for your savings, you can plan a bit, right? You can get access to some funding so you could start a small business. And it is also another important thing. It is the first time that someone has actually had an identification, being known as a person. This is especially true for women. So for 2005, I was the coordinator for the UK for the UN Year of Microcredit. The UK, because of our participation in this UN Year of Microcredit, we won awards of excellence from the United Nations and the World Bank. But the thing that I saw is that professionals want to use their skills to make a difference. And so then we developed the Financial Inclusion Forum, and we're having an event coming up soon on digital ID, so that the UK can learn from international experience, because we need a digital ID in the UK, but we haven't developed it yet. And also then I started giving these microfinance courses for professionals. They wanted to know how to get into this field, and we did field work in Kenya and in India. And it's through that, actually, that Gabriel came on my course. Gabriel can talk about what he was doing, but basically what we've done is we've combined this, if you like, people's passion, professionals' passion to use their skills to make a difference, with what Gabriel has been doing, and he can tell you about his own experience with career coaching and business coaching, because our real purpose is to excite people about the difference that they can make with their work and inspire them for that.
Excellent. So, firstly, sorry, I don't know what happened to my internet. I disappeared, but glad to say you managed to
it went so smoothly, you wouldn't even know.
Oh, good. But back to it. So, thank you for that, Phyllis. So, Gabriel, with your background, so obviously Phyllis touched on it there. So, your background, if I've done my research right, is computer engineering. So, obviously, you met Phyllis through going onto the course. So, how then did that get you to this destination? Can you tell us about that journey?
Let me probably amend your research there. So it's true, my degree back at university was electrical and computer engineering. I actually grew up in Texas. One of the things we say about the social impact game is that we reach people who are often not supported or reached at university, in particular, people who have never been to university, who are the first in their family to go to university, for example. And so there's a term for describing people who may have been from non-privileged backgrounds and maybe the first in their family to go to university. And that term in higher education is called widening participation. And so I would have counted as one of those people. Growing up, we didn't have money, but my first project was doing a voluntary project at high school and then at university, created a CD of original music for charity. And so even as I was growing up, I wanted to make a difference with my work. So when I graduated, I went into consulting, business consulting. So I worked in technology business consultancy called Accenture, and I was leading large projects there. And what I really loved about it was the people. I loved being able to help people to make a difference. And so the training and development that you do as a senior consultant to junior consultants was really fun. And then eventually what I wanted to do is I really wanted to help people in a material way. So I started volunteering in my spare time on leading coaching and leadership programs for another organization. So I was basically kind of having my day job at Accenture, where I was delivering projects and mentoring some people with a small amount of the time that you have left over. And then in my evening times and weekends, I was leading seminars on leadership and communication. At some point, that became unsustainable. And I realized what I really wanted to do is spend all of my time helping people make a difference with their work. So I went out on my own as a career and business coach, leveraging all those 10 years of experience at Accenture, and started a business. And one of my first project was for the president of East Timor to help him establish a conservation animal park in his country of East Timor. So took a trip out there. And while I was out there and going through this process, I saw that there was an opportunity to help the folks in East Timor who had a very high unemployment rate to get employment experience through this type of project and be able to send money back home. But how do we help these poor folks send that money home and help their communities? That's where I ended up on Phyllis's Microfinance course to see how we could do that. So then after doing that course and developing that project a bit further, I realized that the work that I was doing to help mid-career professionals make a difference with their work, help small businesses advance their business to make a difference, I was combining those skills with Phyllis's grassroots development work. And we co-founded Learning Without Borders together to deliver a program that not only helps you make a difference with your work, but apply it in a way that helps you grow your business and helps you make a real difference with your career.
So throughout that, you mentioned a few times about having this motivation you wanted to have an impact, you wanted to help people. So where, for you, Gabe, where did that come from? Was it something you've always had as a child, or was it sort of brought onto you by your parents, or?
That's a good question. Ever since I was very young, I was one of those people that my friends would come to for advice. When I was in high school, people would come to me for advice around their studies or advice around their relationships. So I always liked, as a kid, giving advice to people and helping them out. I was in a leadership program called Reserve Officer Training Corps, which is sort of like what I think in the UK they call the cadets. And in those organizations, you get a chance to be a leader of a group of students. And so people look up to you and look to you for guidance. And I really enjoy doing that. At university, I founded a charity for the purposes of producing. I'm a musician. I do songwriting and play piano and sing. And I got 50 of my friends together to develop a CD and produce it for the Native Americans in the Four Corners region to get artisans a better price for their work that they were doing. So Native Americans in the Four Corners will do some crafts, for example, but they don't get a good price because they can't sell it directly. They have to sell it through third parties. So they get really pennies on the dollar. And so my project was to raise money to help them be able to sell their artisan works directly. So I did sort of this pre-sales of CDs, and my friends got together and we produced this CD. And we gave the proceeds of that to the people in the chiefs in those regions. And so I think because I grew up in a sort of, you could say, disadvantaged background and always had to struggle and work hard to get where I was going, I know it would have made a huge difference. I got a lot of support from teachers and things like that, but I recognize the importance of getting that kind of support. And then as an adult working in Accenture, one of the things I discovered with my colleagues is that a lot of them were not fulfilled in their work. And how I solved that problem is I spent my evenings and weekends coaching people in communication and making a difference with their time whilst going to work during the day. And so I thought that this idea of having to split yourself in multiple personalities, during the day you make your money and during the evening you do what you love. It should be for everyone that they spend their time making a difference with their work. And that's why, that's what motivates me, is that people have access to that and can experience that fulfillment through the work that they already do.
That's extraordinary. That's quite a nice story to hear, of where you said about your own background there, coming from disadvantage and then in escaping that, in essence, and wanting to sort of help other people get out of that, or if they are from disadvantage, to give them those opportunities and help as many people as you can in the way. So you've both, well, from my research, you've both travelled quite extensively. And so Phyllis, you mentioned in your TEDx talk regarding your time in Guatemala and how has that experience of other countries, cultures, and seeing this sort of economical unbalance impacted your own lifestyle and your drive?
Well, Gabe mentioned that he's from Texas, and so am I. You know, I grew up in the time of the segregated South, and also I'm one of 10 children. I'm the eldest daughter of 10 children. But we also, we grew up with African Americans living in the same place, which was very, very unusual in Texas at that time. And my father had a filling station business, and he and his business partner employed African Americans in a time when others didn't do that. And they were the managers as well. And so when I first went to work in Mexico City after my first year at university in a poor area, and that expanded my horizon. And then going into the Peace Corps for 2 years, first in Guatemala and then 2 years in Kenya, I was able to really experience how the majority of the people in the world live. And also living for during that time without having running water and electricity, and traveling by bicycle or horseback or walking. And to me, that was one of the greatest educational experiences of my life. Although I like Gabe went to university in Massachusetts, so did I. You know, we both went to university 1,800 miles away from Texas. But I think for me, that experience of living with people as the majority of the people in the world live gave me a whole new dimension about how it is possible to make a difference by really working with people. As I said earlier, it's being able to give that opportunity to people to learn that has really motivated me. Because when people are given a chance, they can really get ahead by believing in themselves and seeing what's possible.
Phyllis, you might want to share about how that recent visit from one of your weaving group women, and how she shared the trajectory of what's happened since you've worked with them.
Yes, because, I was working in Guatemala from 1965 to 1967. November 2019, fortunately just before we started having the problems with COVID, Reina Iku Kutsal, who made that cushion that's behind there, came to visit. She was one of the leaders of the Women's Weaving Group. And she paid for her own visit, her own trip to Europe and the Holy Land for herself and for her great nephew, because of what she had earned from her weavings and then how she invested in land and so on. So she was able to pay for her own trip to Europe and the Holy Land. And she said, that this wouldn't have been possible unless we had done that work together. Because she's a woman with just 2 years of education, a very bright woman. And because she became a leader, and really applied how to do the business and to help other women do it. It really enriched her life. And she could also choose to remain single. And she has helped to educate her nephews and nieces, which she has many. It just goes to show you that when people are given the tools by which they can actually get to work, and they open up that possibility. Raina also was very clearly able to live her purpose of being a leader and showing other women how they could also develop.
Something you touched or mentioned that always baffles me is in having that impact, in especially when you find a scenario of people that live in such disadvantaged sort of communities, is that by impacting one life, that ripple effect it has onto so many people around them. So just by educating and helping one person sort of improve circumstances for themselves, it always seems, from other guests we've had on in previous episodes, it always seems that just further impacts and further ripples, and it just takes that journey on, that more and more people start to learn these skills, and it's all shared, it's all pushed across to more and more people.
But one of the things that I think is really important is to realize that also people here in the UK are disadvantaged. And I'm talking about even people who are at university, because sometimes they have been brought up in a very narrow set of circumstances. And our education system, sort of perpetuates that. You go for getting this qualification, you go for another qualification, and so on, without actually having this contact with the real world, or where you have to use your skills practically. And this is where I think it's not just the people in Guatemala, but it's the people that we have here that are also disadvantaged. And this is why, there's a Gallup poll from 2017 that says 85% of people are disengaged at work. And the thing is that people don't realize, how they can make a difference with their work, but very often they feel trapped. And I think that this is a disadvantage. And so what we do in the social impact game is that we break that apart. In a way, sometimes you could say we literally are shaking people by the shoulders. But the way that we start is that we help people get in touch with what their purpose is. Because a lot of people think that they are powerless. And so by helping them get in touch with their purpose, then it slowly starts working. Wait a minute, I actually have a choice about how I'm doing things.
You said there that keyword purpose, Phyllis, is something that when we had our conversation before, you mentioned, and you asked me a lot around what my purpose is, and definitely got me sort of really thinking. And even since that conversation, I've still carried on thinking about how, and it's helped me identify things more. So what would you say, so like for people listening now, sort of thinking on that and going, my purpose, what sort of guidance can you give them to help someone find that purpose? Obviously on the social impact game is part of it, but how does someone go about identifying exactly what their purpose is?
Before we answer that question, Hayden, I think it's worth kind of understanding what we mean by purpose. Mm-hmm. If you speak to anybody who's in the business of helping people get clarity about their lives in some way, it's almost universal that you'll hear people say, it's important to get clarity of purpose, right? That's a very commonly held and understood point. However, one of the things that we say about purpose is we simplify it down. So we use the illustration of a mug. So imagine you put the kettle on and you open your cupboard, right? It takes you a millisecond to select a mug that you're going to use, because a mug is a receptacle for hot beverages. That's the purpose of a mug. Now, here's the thing. A mug can be used for other stuff. You can put pencils and pens and put it on your desk. So a mug can be used for other things, but is that what it's for? Are you getting to use the cool handle and the insulation properties of the mug? So it's the same with a person, right? We have to declare what we're for. And if we don't declare what we're for, well, the world is just going to use us for whatever it needs us for nearby. And so in a similar way, it's really important for people to get clarity of purpose, which is to say in a statement, what you are for. I am for, and then fill in that blank so that you can communicate with others what it is you're for. So Phyllis, you were going to share about how we get to people to that sense of purpose.
Well, we have an activity that we do either with the professionals we're working with or with the students on the social impact game. And they work with another person to get to understand what are the times when they really felt fulfilled and what are the things that are really frustrating for them. And then we have a one-on-one session where we listen to them about their fulfillments and their frustrations and help them draw out of that what their purpose is. Because each of us has a purpose. It's walking alongside us all the time. But a lot of people don't dare to discover what their purpose is and then to live from that purpose. And this is why I say it's a bit like shaking people by the shoulders. It's like saying, you know what, you've got a purpose and you've got to dig down and see what it is that really matters to you, why you're here.
And I think one of the key points that Phyllis made there that I'd like to emphasize is when we look at purpose, if you speak to most people who call themselves coaches, they'll say, look at those highlights, look at those moments of fulfillment in your life and make a list of those. And we have people do that. But the other side of the purpose coin is those frustrations you heard Phyllis talk about. So for example, for me, it drives me mad when people say they hate their job or they're not experiencing fulfillment with their work or they're bored. Like as Phyllis described, you want to shake them because that gets in my gut as no, that's not okay with me. People should not live a life where they spend all that time contributing to the universe through their work and they don't experience that fulfillment. So your frustrations are your key. That's where a lot of the insight about what matters to you lives. Most of us can think of only a couple of moments of fulfillment, but we can usually make a relatively long list of things that get under our skin. It's not okay with me that in the world, X happens. And in that statement, in that list of frustrations, combined with your fulfillments, you will see themes that Phyllis rightly said. Getting to the theme there, drawing out those themes is where your purpose lives, where you get to see who you really are and what you're about. And then you can use that awareness to make decisions about how you spend your time and decisions about what you want to do with your future, with your career, with your business.
So with that, can a purpose change for someone over time?
You know what? I think, I'm only talking about from my own experience because I'm a champion for empowering the undervalued. And I know that that has been my purpose from the time that I was a small child. When I lived with African Americans and I saw the injustice that was there. And I know that one of my big frustrations was not being able to do anything about it because this man who was so kind to my family, who brought us food when we needed it, he got killed by white people and they never got punished for it. There's so many people that are undervalued and we tend to undervalue ourselves. And I think a lot of that is because of our frustration about not being able to live our purpose. I don't know if purpose changes throughout life. I can only speak from my own experience. It can be that people's awareness opens up and then they get that clarity about what their purpose is. Because a lot of people might think, I'm in this job to make some money and I want to have I want to be able to provide for my family and so on. But I heard this is a statement by the guy who developed that Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Robert
series.
Kiyosaki.
And he said, what most of us want is that we want, to have security in our lives, but we also want to be able to scratch that itch that's in our soul. And that itch is what your purpose is, I think.
Yeah, and to
your
make point,
to make a difference in some way in the world. There, we have three main drives as human beings. One is to make a difference in the world. Another one is to achieve mastery. And the other one is to have some autonomy. to have some agency, right? And so I know that by not living your purpose, so many people feel frustrated, and then they get to a point and they go like, why am I here? What am I doing? And, you hear about the midlife crisis and other things like that. But, so many people are frustrated. We have such high levels of addictions. We distract ourselves from why we're really here.
Yeah, and I think to reiterate the point that Phyllis rightly made there, which is that I believe that your purpose doesn't change, but you might get closer and closer and increased awareness of what it is.
Yeah.
You might change how you say it, but the fundamental of who you are is who you are. And it doesn't matter to us. Like, there's a lot of schools of thought of how it came to be, and that doesn't matter to us, how you got to have that purpose. Now it's a question of knowing what it is and how can you fulfill on it. And I think, Phyllis, you make a great point there, which is that a lot of the stress people feel, a lot of the frustration, a lot of the difficulties people describe having, it's a lack of purpose. And what happens is when we get that clarity of what we're about in the world, a lot of the other problems we have start to resolve, right? We have that sense of purpose and clarity, and all of a sudden, how we advance our career gets clearer. How we help our family gets clearer. How we engage with our community gets clearer. All of a sudden, everything that's been making us upset is clear why it's upsetting us. So we no longer get stressed about it. We now see it as an opportunity to make a difference.
So do you see purpose being something from within that we identify ourselves, or can it be something that's thrust upon you? So I'm just thinking, I keep sort of in my head when I think of the questions, I'm thinking back to that mug. But obviously a mug is a man-made product that's there. It's given its purpose. But as a person, I just think how many of us go through life with all live in different lives, have different experiences, and the amount of people that can have something, well, you say like a midlife crisis, or something can be thrust upon them in life where it's completely revolutionized how they think about existence and what they want to do, and that can give people their purpose. So is it something that's intrinsic and it's born within and we eventually find it, or is it something that can be sort of put onto us?
That's a good question, Hayden. I'll take a crack at it, and then maybe Phyllis has a view as well. The way we go about engaging in this inquiry, when we have you make a list of your fulfillments, which goes all the way back to childhood, and a list of your frustrations, which again can go all the way back to childhood, right? What we find is that it's not the circumstances that were thrust upon you, but how you engaged with those circumstances, how you interpreted those circumstances, what you made of them, what you decided about those circumstances, about the world around you, and about what mattered to you. So people can have the similar circumstance they face, similar challenge life thrusts at them, but come to very different views about what that means their role in the world is, right? So to answer your question, my view would be that it's our internal way we respond to the world around us. Even if it seems like the forces that are happening is external, our response comes from who we are. And the more we can understand what that is, the more we can use it to navigate and lean into what our natural propensity is to make a difference in the world.
I think it is a combination of nature and nurture. I think it's about developing our consciousness, about how much we can be open to the signals that we're getting. And when I say those signals, it can be from how we're working together with other people, but it also can be a deeper signal. As I said, it's that itch we want to scratch when we know that there's something more there. And so it's how much we're able to, because it's there in our subconsciousness. In life, we only are using maybe 10% in our consciousness, but that subconscious is that big ocean that's under us, that we're floating in. And it's how much we can keep bringing these things up to the surface and becoming more aware.
Do you think sometimes it comes down to mindfulness as well? Because sometimes if someone's feeling a certain way, they actually won't question why they're feeling that way. But if you take the time to get to know yourself and be mindful of your emotions and your thoughts, you might identify a bit more your purpose in a way.
I think it is. It's, the Indian, like in yoga, which means union, they talk about the different chakras in the body, the different energy points. And I think it is opening up the different chakras, opening ourselves up more to our own energies. When you said about mindfulness, it's becoming more aware and becoming aware of something that's bigger, because I think this thing about purpose we're talking about, there is something bigger than myself, and I am somehow connected to this something that's bigger. And I want to be able to play my part in that connection. And that, I think, is what it is, that purpose is. It's that connectedness.
I think you make a good point there, Phyllis. And I think one of the things to observe about what Phyllis has just said there is that what purpose isn't, it isn't surface. It isn't just a statement you say to kind of, I'm about this or that, to just trying to get off the subject. If you get a really clear purpose statement, it's meaningful. You can feel it in your gut that that's what you're about, right? And that's what we're looking for. And we will oftentimes have people inquire more deeply to that part, using, as you described there, David, mindful approaches, getting really connected, as Phyllis has been saying, to what we're about. This is the work we do is secular, but it has sort of that experience. You get that almost spiritual experience when you're really connecting with what you are and who what you're about, because all of a sudden your life has meaning, which people who follow spiritual practice, that's what they're doing. They're using their spiritual practice as a way to access meaning in their lives. And so the work that we do about getting people connected to purpose in a very secular inquiry can give people access to that connection that they're looking for from within, and get in touch with what they're about and what they're on this planet for.
Do you think childhood trauma or suffering would enable someone to identify their purpose easier? The reason I say is just with you said about finding your motivations and also your frustrations, but both of you mentioned different struggles, especially earlier on, and finding your drive and mentioning struggles and challenges you had in childhood. So would you therefore think, because as well, when you look at some of the highest performers in the world at what they do, oftentimes when you go back to their childhood, it came from something of struggle or of trauma. So do you think that can play a key part in helping someone identify purpose much quicker?
Hayden, can I challenge the premise of the question?
Go for it.
So it seems like if you look at the examples that are most famous, as you described, that the people who seem purposeful are those who had some childhood experience that shook them, right? That's what I think is really, and I think you highlight what seems to be a commonality. But then what happens is, from that view, people have the converse belief that they don't have a sense of purpose, or they can't easily access that sense of purpose because they don't recollect a specific trauma. And that's the premise I want to challenge here, is that every person, the nature of human condition is that even something that may not seem like a struggle for you or for me or for someone else was a struggle for someone, right? Yeah. Something that may seem mundane still exists as that person has some struggle. Maybe when they were a kid, they were bullied, or maybe when they were a kid, they had trouble with math, or maybe when they, we all have some experience in our lives that started to form our view of the world. We're not numb creatures just floating around our lives. And it doesn't matter who you are, what your background is, whether you're quote unquote privileged. A great example is a lot of conversation is going on right now about middle class, middle-aged white men who have historically been seen as at an advantage in society, but are experiencing depression, are experiencing difficulty, are feeling overlooked, are feeling marginalized in their own way, right? And that isn't, of course, to diminish the marginalization that we all recognize, the systematic marginalization. But the thing is, every person can have an experience. And so the key of the work that we do is it's that every person, by the nature of being a human being, can get in touch with something about who you are. And your life, everyone has a life experience that they can touch upon.
No, I think you've said that so well, Gabe, because, for example, my friend Reina, who's, the Mayan woman who I told you the story about how she was the leader of the weaving group and she came here to London paying for it herself. She could have said, oh, I had such a tough time, I can't do anything. And she didn't, she made choices about what she was doing in her life. And I agree, every one of us could pinpoint something in our lives, as Gabe was just saying, that was tough for them. Just the experience of being born is a trauma. So we could all pick out those things. And it is really how you develop yourself so that you can deal with circumstances. You can't necessarily change the circumstances, but you can change how you're being about the circumstances. And I think that that's at the core of what we're saying, is that when you get in touch with what your purpose is, and you choose, I'm going to do something because that is aligned with my purpose. Because we also say it's just as important to know what to say no to as it is to say yes to. And also, it is that people have to go through a lot of different stages in their lives, developing themselves in their career, developing their proficiency, and so on. I've had plenty of times when I've had to do really dirty work, that most people wouldn't say, I'm not going to bother to do that, and for that amount of money. But because I feel like I'm living my purpose, that doesn't matter to me. I will find a way that I'm being about that circumstance. And that I think that's the really fundamental thing. Everyone can say, oh, I've had a hard time. But how is it that you actually are resilient? And how are you really being true to yourself?
So it almost comes back to what Dave was sort of saying with his question around mindfulness, about being aware and identifying, well, as you touched on, identifying what it is that motivates you and what it is that has frustrated you or traumatized you or worsened you in any way, and about using that experience and seeing how it can guide you and find your purpose. So certainly for myself thinking now, and I'm sure for anyone listening, it's going to have everyone evaluating their life and thinking, okay, how do I find my purpose? And so to use my own example, I'm thinking, okay, I've got my business and I'd see my purpose after we had our conversation, Phyllis. I've been thinking a lot about purpose. So I'm thinking mine's around, with my company vision, a world that works with the environment, not against it. So I see my purpose being in a key player in seeing the community, the nation, the world, however far I can stretch it, in becoming more sustainable in the way we live and less wasteful. So I suppose it is two questions. It's one, how does someone know they've got the right purpose and they've not misunderstood what their purpose is? And two, how do you therefore begin? Because I suppose for everybody, it's going to be expressed in different ways.
How to begin? I'll give you the step-by-step, even though we may have said it earlier I'll break it down now, the steps to take. Step one, make a list of those moments you experience fulfillment, which are those moments in your life when you had the thought, wow, I'm really making a difference with what I'm doing here. These are productive moments when you really felt you made a difference. You make a list of those. That's the first step. Second step, make a list of frustrations. And the key here is either frustrations from your past where he says, it's not okay with me that blank happened. Or it can be things you observe out there in the world. It's not okay with me that inequality exists, for example, right? Between some groups of people and another group of people. You could put that on your list and list specific examples. Don't do generalities. List a specific experience or specific moment that you can recall that relates to that frustration, where you felt that frustration. So you make that's your second list, your list of frustrations. Now, what you do is you sit down with a buddy some friend, family, colleague, someone that you trust. And you use them as a sounding board to help you identify the theme, right? So what is the theme, the common link between your fulfillments and your frustration list? What is the thread, right? And so what we usually have people do is you list what those themes are, just the phrases that kind of link those up. So that's step 3, kind of make phrases. And you can use the thesaurus.com, by the way, because sometimes you're trying to really look for the words to express yourself. So we do that a lot. So that's step 3. Step 4 is to formulate a statement that expresses it. And the format of the statement is, I am for, and then you fill in the blank, right? So you say, I am for professionals making an inspiring impact with their work. That's what I am for, right? So you create a statement of what you're for, and what you're saying really inspires you. And then you take your statement and you go and check your fulfillments and frustrations list to see, do those represent? Does it relate to each other? All right. So now let's say you have a purpose statement you're satisfied with. Step 5 is to write it on a sticky, put it on your computer screen, put it on your mirror. And then what you do is you say, right, on a particular task, a particular project, a particular business opportunity, how does this help me fulfill my purpose? If you cannot see a direct link between how your purpose can be fulfilled and this, you either create that link or you say no, as you heard Phyllis say no to the opportunity, right? So you use your purpose to guide yourself, and you share your purpose with the people around you. You can put it in some format on your LinkedIn profile. You can start to share it with people and tell people what you're for, so they know when to contact you, when to get help from you about something. Right, so that's how you get started with that. Go ahead, Phyllis, if there's anything I missed off there.
No, I think you gave a really good explanation of the process that we've developed, that we work with people with. For example, Hayden, as you said, after our conversation, you started thinking about your purpose, and developing. You've made a really good. I think you've made a really good purpose statement there. There may be some ways that you want to refine it a bit, but it seems to me that you've got the juice of it. You've got the essence of it. And something that you go like, wow, I can actually see that that's what, that's me. That's what's motivating me. Yes, that's what gets me out of bed in the morning, because I know I'm living that. And then you'll be able to choose. Somebody offers you something, and you go like, wait a minute, does that really work with my purpose? And then you'll go, you really have a truth test about it, and you see that. I could just say though that, of course, what we have done in designing the social impact game as it is, that we've designed it so that we put people into a challenging situation where, in this case, it's with the students and the business partners and the project advisors, that they get clarity about their purpose. And then in the way the game is structured, they have to see, are you actually living your purpose in the way that you're playing the game? Okay, so the game is, you have to do a project where you create a social impact. You can actually demonstrate, we have created this social impact. It is calling people to look at the world in a different way, because we're so used to doing something where we just get a result. For example, someone could say, I ran an event. And then we could say, but so what? What actually was the impact of that event? How do you know that it made an impact? And so we're asking people to fundamentally question, first of all, are you really clear about the pain, the problem you're trying to solve? And are you building in measures so that you know that you have solved that problem?
I think that's a good point, Hayden. For you, as you reflect on your business, as you were mentioning there, it's like, what is the pain your business exists to solve, and how do you measure that you're actually addressing it? Because what we often do is we find a pain, we come up with some ideas of how we can address it, but we don't actually check that we're actually solving the pain we set out to solve. We don't measure that. We don't follow through to say, well, I said I cared about the living with the environment instead of working against it, right? It's like, well, okay, how do you know you're doing that? In what way are you going to check that what I'm doing through my business is accomplishing that intent, right? And that's where we help people in their projects is what's the pain you're trying to solve with this project? And at the end, how will you know you've actually addressed that pain in any way, in some measurable, noticeable way? And that's the thing that we've come to discover through our work with business partners. These are organizations, large and small, working with professionals who've been experienced with years of experience in industry and working with the students. This is the hardest skill that people struggle with, is getting clarity about the problem they're trying to address, the pain they're trying to address in the world, the social problem they're trying to address, and how do they tell that they've actually solved the problem with any solution they come up with.
So in identifying, so someone goes through, they identify their purpose and start using that as a way to guide them through life. So it's something in my understanding, it's something you can apply to your work, whether that's starting your own business, whether that's in your job, but it's about, even if you identify that the company you work for is completely wrong, it's about using that purpose as a guide so that when you're applying for jobs, when it comes to that interview, have you got any questions for us? Yes, here's my purpose, or here's the purpose I want to serve in life. How do you align with that? Am I going to fit in here? And I suppose as well, you can then apply that to conversations you have, the way you socialize, the way you pick and choose what hobbies you do, can all align to it. It's all starting to make sense. I like it. Do you, in your opinion, does purpose equal happiness for someone?
Just touch on something you said there, Hayden, before we answer the happiness question.
Yeah.
Which is you use your purpose, yes, to help you decide what organizations you might want to get a job at, right? But you can, here's one of the messages we make in the social impact game, is that you can make a difference wherever you are.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't have to be on the surface that your organization, say you work for Unilever as an example, right? It may seem to someone who works at Unilever that my organization just cares about making money. But as an individual in the organization, when you're clear about your purpose, you can then start to inquire, how can I use my purpose and start fulfilling my purpose in this workplace? How can I use it to help this organization be more purposeful? And I use Unilever as an example on purpose with intent, because one of our current students went to an assessment center for Unilever, and they had to go through this process of interviewing. And one of the interview questions was about what their purpose was and how it related to the role they were going to be taking at Unilever. And because they participated in the social impact game, were getting coached by us in the social impact game, they were able to make that link and they got the placement. And that's really compelling. So even organizations that you might consider aren't about making a difference, aren't about making a social impact, aren't about being purposeful, they are often intend to be purposeful at the most senior levels, but people's day-to-day experience isn't that. And it's our job as individuals in an organization to step up and start being that from the ground up. The question of happiness, Phyllis, I'll pass that back over to you. Just wanted to make that point.
I'm really glad you gave that example from the Unilever because it came up in a conversation that we had in our webinar with our student coaches. And there was a student coach who is now, she's now doing a really great job. She's based in Turkey and she's working with a music organization that spans from Australia through Europe to the United States and managing all these time zones. And she's being a coach on the social impact game. And she coached the student about purpose and helped her not just to say, well, it's the purpose of Unilever, but to find out what is the purpose of the segment of the organization she was going to work with and what that role would be. And then she was, the student going in the assessment, was able to be really articulate and clear about that. So to me, I mean, that's like, okay, let's just go to happiness then on the strength of that. You know, happiness, I think, is sometimes you can be suffering and still be happy at a deeper level. Because a lot of people think happy is like happy clappy, you know, oh, I've got my car, I've got my job, I've got my kids, I've got my this, that, and the other. And I should be happy. And I think happiness is something that's a lot more fundamental. it's about if you actually feel that you basically are being creative in your life. There's two ways you can be. You're either a creator or you're a consumer. So you, someone who's actually creating something worthwhile, look at an artist. I mean, I recently read, this is Paris from 1900 to 1910 with Picasso, Matisse, Derain, and other artists. And those people were like in the dredges. They were living in the gutter, no question about it. And they persevered. So would it be a really relevant question? Are you happy? It's really a really relevant question is, are you fulfilling something substantial in your life?
I think that's really the point. And that, again, that's about the question we're asking. We often think about, well, let's check in on the question we're asking and what do we mean by that question? And I think Phyllis hit it on the nose, which is that instead of asking ourselves, are we happy or does it lead to happiness? The question is, does it lead to fulfillment? Do you feel that your life is making the difference you're on the planet to make? And you can have moments of, where you have one emotion or another emotion. I oftentimes joke, Phyllis will always make fun of me because I'm a long distance runner. So if you get me onto the top, I could do a whole podcast with you guys on running. So
don't even go there.
I do ultra distance running. So I run 100-mile races, 160 kilometers. The longest race I've done so far is from Birmingham to London and Bristol to London, which are 145 miles, 233 kilometers. And I'm training for a race this September, which is from Athens to Sparta, which is 247 kilometers, 153 miles. Right. So, yeah, I'm crazy. And ultra, if you ask an ultra runner, do they love ultras or do they enjoy running the race? The truth of the matter is, during the race, a lot of the times you're asking, what on earth am I doing during the race? You're hurting everywhere. You're sore. You're tired. You're angry. You're irritable. You haven't slept for hours and days, sometimes more than a day. So you're not in the moment. You wouldn't say the emotion you're going to use to describe your experience is happiness, but you're on a mission to get to the finish line. And we all have our own motivations and reasons why we engage in this. But fundamentally, it's about asking yourself and exploring what you're capable of doing. How can you accomplish something that inspires you, right? How can you inspire yourself? How you can inspire those around you? And although I love running, I find that it inspires a lot of people I know that I do these crazy races. So even when I'm out there and I'm hating it every minute, I want to persevere because I know people are inspired when I cross that finish line. In a similar way, in our lives are not even a marathon. Our lives are ultra marathons. We can have any given moment of our life where we experience stress or frustration or a good time or a bad time, right? But are we fulfilling what we want to do with our lives so that as we get through our lives, we're inspired and we're inspiring those around us, right? That's, for me, a more interesting question to inquire than am I happy or are other people happy in sort of the way we use that word modern in our modern society.
You're saying that, Gabe, reminded me of a quote from Oscar Wilde. And of those of you who know this area around Trafalgar Square, there's a statue of Oscar Wilde behind St. Martin in the Fields Church. And the quote on that is that all of us are in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars.
So on my question with the purpose and happiness, I think it's hard to articulate it now. Because I want to apply it to when you look at the statistics on which you alluded to earlier, Phyllis, on people's satisfaction at work and how the overall encompassment of what they're doing with their life, the amount of hours they spend at work, the level of happiness that we all experience, and that is just something that's quite low. And especially now in the pandemic, it's something that's lowered. Especially, I think the recent stats came out about January and February. It's now the lowest that people have actually ever felt. And when you talk about being creative or consumer and as artists, so I went to an arts college and, I did 1/3 of a degree in fine art. But on that, being surrounded by people at college that were being creative and expressing themselves in that way every day, the thing I found in college in particular, surrounded by people studying art, is genuinely the mental health the mental health was lower for people that were particularly creative, and it's a lot of their work was often quite dark, and just when you had those discussions with people, something like anxiety, depression was all quite strong amongst everybody there. With a lot of people, it was something that was quite prevalent. So I suppose the question is maybe the question is more, is purpose, finding your purpose, serving your purpose and living through it, is that something that do you think can increase your mental health more so?
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely.
And just to say that analogy I gave between creativity and consumer is I'm talking about fundamental creativity. The way you wash the dishes, the way you sweep the floor, you can be creative in that time of doing it. It's having that, as I said, it's the way that you approach the work that you're doing.
Yeah, and I think going on what you're asking there, which is, it's almost like the question you want to ask: is this purpose the answer to mental well-being? Of course, we don't mean this in a clinical sense, right? Certainly, but in a well-being sense, and I would argue that a big contributing factor to people struggling with wellness has to do with that lack of purpose. Human beings are built to make some kind of difference, and it originates to our desire to be a part of a community and feel part of something bigger than ourselves. And what happens is, especially in some cultures, particularly those of us in the West, we have more of an individualistic culture. And getting to your purpose gets you connected to how you fit in the big picture of everything, how you fit in the community, how you fit in the world. And that lack of awareness of how I fit in the big picture makes you feel alone and isolated, which then can have the follow-on impacts of the mental well-being challenges you describe. So even the artists, I've coached some artists, and when they get that clarity of purpose, what do I want to use my art for in the world? It's got to be 1 degree more than just expression. Expression is great, right? Some people want to be successful on the basis of their talent alone. That's great. I'm a songwriter. I did music, right? I love it. But my songs weren't about, and my music wasn't about just expressing something. It was about making some kind of difference with that expression, leaving people with something, moving people in some way into taking some action or seeing something they didn't know was possible. That's always been the motivation behind my artistry. And when I work with artists, I tell them that. It's like, listen, you got to be up to something more than just the flat expression of something. You have to have a purpose with it. You have to, again, I said you have to. You don't really have to. You cannot do that, of course, right? But by bringing purpose to what you do, all of a sudden it's meaningful, not just to you, but to those who engage with your work.
And that's fundamentally what I mean about the creativity. And we use an analogy where we have we call it the 3.0 wavelength, but I won't go into detail about it, but you can take things, imagine you're just a passenger in a car. That's 1.0. 2.0, you're driving the car. But 3.0, you're actually designing the car and the environment around you. And so I think it is that sense of agency, that sense of you're actually being an actor in the world, not simply someone who's receiving things. And again, it goes back to that word we used, the connectivity, that you feel connected to something higher. And by that higher, I mean, we don't have to go and calling it God, but it is connecting to something that's beyond yourself, and that you stretch back over time, connecting with the people that have come before us, and having that sense of connectivity to the people that are coming in future, because you want to make the world better so that it's good for the children that come along later. So it's that connection, realizing that there's something greater than yourself for which you're responsible.
And I think that's really great, because earlier, Hayden, you talked about, the sense of your business, and that is really about creating that future.
Yeah.
Your connectedness to that future is described in your purpose. So I think that's really great.
Yeah.
Something you touched on talking of the Western or more Western world or more economically developed world, where there's more of an individualism rather than a sense of community, and where in less economical circumstances it's more around that community, especially like as we become richer, we start to live more separately. We have our own house, we move out, and there's more distance there, and then we start to discover technology, and then we have phones, and all of a sudden we don't have to go down. I mean, I'm talking in a world before a pandemic. There's not so much of, oh, let's all get together and go and have a party, or let's go around someone's house. It's I can pick up the phone and call them, or I can just drop them a text. It's even easier. So do you think there's in one finding their purpose, is it something where, how do I structure the question? It's in a less economically developed setting, is it something that's easier to obtain or more prevalent? Because when I think of the lifestyles people live in, like I said, I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and I said, if you put a room of multimillionaires, if you put a bunch of multimillionaires in a room together and put people that are poor and penniless in a room together, I'd be pretty certain that those that are happier are the ones that are poor and penniless. They're the ones that they value such, their value is in they find happiness in just being able to get a meal at the end of the day and being able to come together and share moments together. Whereas people with vast sums of money, it seems more that there's this illness around having that money and holding it and keeping it, and there's less of a concentration on being with people. I mean, everybody's individual and everybody's got different drivers, but I suppose the question is, do you think there is more of an attachment to purpose in a less economically developed setting?
I think that's hard, because we generalize so much about rich people and poor people, because I think that there's going to be the spectrum of people who are in tune with their purpose. There'll be people who are in tune with it and who aren't, both in poor and rich backgrounds.
I think that's right. I think that's right.
I think it's really hard to generalize. And I think that there's so much of a romanticism about the noble poor. Because I know people in India who are desperately, really rich and still have a sense of purpose. I mean, I shouldn't say really rich, but I'm thinking of a friend of mine who unfortunately passed away. But he had, he was middle class and so on. He had such a strong sense of purpose. No, I miss him. So I don't think we can generalize that easily.
I think that's a really good point, Phyllis. And I think, to your point, Hayden, if you, I think, again, forgive me for challenging you once again, with the paradigms you're working from, right? But I think the paradigm that rich people are X or purposeless or whatever, I think you'll come to discover when you really, as Phyllis said, when you really start to investigate, it depends on, in some ways, how they got to be wealthy, and what they intend and what they feel their purpose is. You'll find that a lot of them experience being purposeful, and there are some wealthy people who don't care about other people. So I think, as Phyllis described, I think we want to look out for our tendency to generalize people, because what that does is it then closes off our ability to make a difference to a whole group of people, or to access and engage a whole group of people. And this is probably one of our biggest challenges in communication. We deal with this in the social impact game, which is, how do you communicate with people that are different than you, and that have a different set of experiences than you? How do you do that effectively? And one of the first things we have to do is recognize that people are coming from those different perspectives, and everyone has something to bring to the table. And the more we recognize the value that every single person, regardless of your circumstance or background, whether you'd call it advantage or not, every person has something to bring to the table, and some magic to bring, and some contribution to make.
Yeah.
And the more we open our minds to that, the more we can create the collaborative environment that seems to be missing a lot in society. And it's been exacerbated during this recent pandemic. This is our opportunity to look at everyone and see that they have something to bring to the table.
I agree with you, because all of us as human beings suffer in some way. And sometimes it's in that suffering that we can find the joy. I think we've got to be really careful about generalizing about people, and recognizing, as Gabe said, that everybody has a contribution to make.
Definitely agree with you there. And but no, thank you for answering the question. It makes it interesting. So on the social impact game, so how you've developed so far, where is the future with the social impact game? Where do you want to take it, and how do you want to expand it into other universities? Yes,
we do. And we've got, we're in conversation with at least one other university, and also with at the level of the further education colleges as well, to have a version that would be suitable for that. Because 16-year-olds also have their purpose, and they can engage in making and doing a social impact game as well as people at university or people whatever age they are. It's our heart's desire to expand the social impact game. So many people, when they hear about the social impact game, they say, "Wow, I wish I had that when I was at university." If we had £1 for every person that says that, we'd be doing really well.
I can imagine.
Yes.
Yeah,
and just to say, we had the experience of working for 1 year in China with a version of the social impact game, and we were very successful in helping ignite in this. It was a microfinance organization working with 50 managers, helping them get clarity about their purpose as an organization, and really acting on that. But then, unfortunately, the business partner that we had, because that company said, "This is so good, you should expand it across China." But the business partner we had was, for expanding it, was a quasi-governmental organization. And we didn't get the traction that we would have wanted to do that. So that's why we're focusing on the UK primarily. And also because a lot of people think that in order to make a social impact, that they have to go off to Africa or work for a charity. And so we're dispelling that myth, because you can make a social impact wherever you are.
I think that's really important. And so in terms of expanding, as Phyllis highlighted, we want to expand it to other universities. We want to expand it to the further education colleges. We also will be making it available to individual professionals that want to make a social impact with their work. And of course, organizations that want to use their organization to make a social impact and train their people in producing impact with the projects and work that they do every day. And so our vision is that we help people and organizations to start shifting what they understand impact is and where they think they have to look. As you heard Phyllis say, right? You don't have to go somewhere far and flung and away to make a difference, right? A lot of the difference that wants and needs to be made is here, where you are. And of course, within the UK, of course, probably the United States, and we're focused at the moment on English language countries, because we did a lot of translating for China. And we learned that adds a layer of complexity to your work. And in particular, because the ideas we talk about are not ideas people were trained growing up in, right? This is a conversation that's new for a lot of people. And it takes real engagement and inquiry. And so sometimes it can be difficult, especially when the cultures are quite different. It can be difficult to express that in a way that those cultures understand it too. And I think that's one of the learnings we had in China, is that a lot of what we were communicating, they did get, but there was a level at which that was difficult to get across to people because of the translation and getting it in a format that they could have a relationship to. So, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing it expanding. And I think what you've done is exceptional. And it's definitely challenging the status quo of how we think about education. And I can definitely see why many people would say, oh, if only I had that. And I think I wish it was part of a school syllabus, really. And it'd be great to sort of learn that sort of thing, have that guidance and that tuition when you're in school, especially from a younger age, to sort of go on that course of finding your purpose.
And so our model is that we're looking to plant this in the university or in the colleges and so on, so that the methodology and the approach that will be delivered by people in those organizations, that we're giving it away, if you like, in the sense giving those training people in those skills and with the methodology that we have. It's not going to be for us that we're delivering everything, but now we're in the process of automating a lot of things and training people so that it can be planted in other places.
Yeah. Well, as I say, I look forward to seeing it grow. And want to keep up in touch with the story and see how you expand it. So one thing I always like to end on, one question, and I'll ask both of you. So what is, on the topic of benevolent business and making the world a better place, what is one thing that exists within humanity that you hope in the future will be eradicated? If we go alphabetically, Gabe?
I think the one thing that I think I'd like to eradicate in humanity, as you describe it, is the sense that other people are separate, apart, and irrecoverably different than me. That viewpoint, I think, is the source of a lot of our challenges. As we get that sense of purpose and connection with others around us and the communities around us, we recognize that we're all in the same boat, literally, and that we can help and contribute to each other. And I think the more we understand ourselves and those around us, the more we are able to make the difference we're on the planet to make.
Perfect. Thank you, Gabe.
I think my answer is going to be something similar. There's a thing called the Course in Miracles. And it said that there's just two things. There's love or fear. And I think it is eradicating that fear and that fear of the other and realizing that stranger is just a friend that I haven't made yet. We can see it now that so many people can't have a dialogue about an issue. It becomes very much along political lines, and that there isn't the capacity to listen. And I think that that's a fear. And so for me, it would be eradicating that fear of the other.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Phyllis. Thank you both of you for giving your time up and coming on. It's been an extraordinary conversation to have. So thank you both. Thank you, Gabe.
Thank you so much, Hayden and Dave. It's I must say it's been a great pleasure, and I really think it's wonderful that you're living your purpose.
Yes, and this has been great fun, and thank you also for standing for businesses making an impact. We really admire the work that you're doing. So
if people want to follow you online, follow your journey, where can they find you?
So they can, we're on Twitter, Learning WOB. Our website is learning-without-borders.com. Or more easily, socialimpactgame.com.
Right. I'll put all the links to those in the description for the podcast as well.
Thank you. And then please reach out to us if you are interested in us, coming along on our courses for professionals. That'll probably happen in the second half of this year. And it will still be done as the social impact game where you'll be doing a project implementing the methodology. Also, if you are at a university that would be interested in finding out more, just please contact us.
So that was a really long interview, but I thought it was really good, especially when it comes to knowing your purpose. Everyone gets told, find your purpose, follow your purpose, and you're going to be happy in life. But it's hard to actually figure that out. I mean, I feel like I sort of fell into my profession a little bit. But when I actually look back at my earlier life, I was always a person with the camera. I was always filming, I was going to gigs and filming and stuff. So I sort of found my purpose by accident. But if I had someone earlier on helping me find my way and define my purpose, I think I'd have got started on my business a lot earlier. What about you?
Yeah, I think, well, same with you. I just fell into what I do because it was just the way the universe felt. That's the things that came along in my life at the time. But it's in having that conversation, it taught me how to find clarity over purpose, and that purpose isn't something it's not a simple statement. It's got to be something that's really embedded within you, I guess. And so that's been quite an eye-opener for me in terms of thinking what my purpose is and rethinking what it is, and then really analysing it and understanding what it is wholeheartedly. To then, because obviously it's got to be something that you're incredibly motivated by and inspired by, that's going to drive you through life. It was nice to have an interview where I was challenged with my questions as well.
That was pretty funny. Every time it's just like, Hayden, before I answer your question, do you mind if I just bring something up about that?
No, I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, this obviously shows that he really knows what he's talking about as well. And with Phyllis as well, she was very considered in what she was saying. She wouldn't just say something. She'd say it, and then there'd be a few seconds pause while she's mulling over what she's going to say next. So it's not just speaking off, it is speaking off the top of your head, but it's making sure what you're saying is right as well. So yeah, two people that really know what they're talking about.
Yeah, two people that are very much more intelligent than myself, and helping me ask better questions. Although their feedback at the end, like the bit that not everybody hears, the feedback at the end was very positive and they were very kind, and it was a great conversation to have.
Well, that's the point in asking questions, though, isn't it? We're not experts in what they do, so we might ask the wrong question, and that's all right.
It was only me, I would say, though. That
I was pretty quiet on that one. So who have we got coming up next week? Right.
Next week, Dave, we're joined by Keith Mabutt, the CEO of Street Soccer Foundation. So that's going to be another great conversation, one I cannot wait to get started with.
Well, we've already recorded it, so we know it's a good conversation, but everyone else gets to hear it. If in the meantime people want to get in touch and give us their feedback, thoughts, comments on this week's episode, how can they do that?
They can do that by finding us on socials at Benevolent Business Podcast on Facebook, on Instagram. You can reach out to Dave and me personally on LinkedIn. Just search for our names, Dave Proud, Hayden Bloomfield. Or you can email me, hayden.bloomfield@hotmail.com.
Awesome.
See you next week.
See you next week.